Between 1923 and 1925, the Northern Pacific Railway quietly assembled one of the most important and largest boxcar groups in its history. Not locomotives, not passenger equipment, but boxcars. 4,000 double-sheathed wooden boxcars entered service during this period, forming the largest single block of freight cars on the railroad through the late 1920s and well into the 1950s. By 1953, these cars were no longer new. Some were already 3 decades old, yet they remained a common working presence in freight trains across the northern plains. To understand why the 10,000 series boxcars existed at all, it helps to step back to the years immediately following World War I. Federal control under the United States Railroad Administration introduced standardized freight car designs on a scale the industry had never seen before. When that control ended, railroads, manufacturers, and the railroad press evaluated what had worked. The conclusion was hard to ignore. The USRA boxcars were durable, they were practical, and they were capable of exceptionally long service lives. Many would remain in operation long enough to see another world war. The success of the USRA cars made that lesson increasingly clear. But acceptance did not mean imitation. The Northern Pacific did not adopt USRA boxcar designs outright. Instead, it absorbed the lessons without copying the blueprint. What followed was not a clone, but an improvement. Beginning in 1923, Northern Pacific built cars in its own shops in Brainerd, Minnesota, and purchased additional cars from several outside builders, introducing a new generation of boxcars that reflected this shift in thinking. The 10,000 series boxcars were double-sheathed, 40-foot cars built over fish belly steel center sills. They echoed the structural strength of USRA designs while retaining distinctly Northern Pacific proportions and construction practices. They differed slightly in dimensions, with an interior length of 40 feet 9 inches and an interior height of 8 feet 8 inches. All were delivered with Northern Pacific's trademark radial roofs and the railroad's preferred minor ideal lever style handbrake. All 4,000 cars were delivered with Murphy corrugated ends featuring 7 corrugations above the center line and 8 below. The cars rode on Barber lateral motion trucks and were equipped with lumber doors at the A end, consistent with Northern Pacific practices of this era. The 10,000 series boxcars largely retain their original configuration, though not without upgrades. During the 1940s, their original KC brake systems were replaced with AB air brakes, bringing them into line with evolving safety and interchange standards. In the early 1950s, structural updates on some cars replaced the original trapezoidal side-to-end brackets with longer reinforcing straps that extended from the side sheets to the car ends. These changes allowed wooden boxcars to remain viable in a railroad world increasingly dominated by steel. As delivered, the 10,000 series carried arched Northern Pacific lettering with simple white stenciling. Repaints beginning around 1940 introduced the Northern Pacific Monad Herald. As common practice on the Northern Pacific, most radial roof cars were coated with black car cement. The railroad also applied car cement to steel ends, and in many photographs of the 10,000 series during this period, the contrast between the black roofs and ends is clearly visible. Beginning in 1951, fresh repaints brought a larger 48-inch monad with the slogan "Main Street of the Northwest" added below it. By 1953, the fleet most commonly appeared in a mix of these two lettering schemes. In that year, these boxcars were not relics. They remained frontline freight equipment, hauling grain, lumber, and general merchandise. They appeared regularly in manifest freights and locals across the system, and many wandered far beyond Northern Pacific rails through interchange service. They were maintained to a standard high enough that many continued to be used in grain service to mills in Minnesota. Only a well-maintained boxcar would be selected for that assignment. On the Northern Pacific's lines through eastern Montana and western North Dakota, a freight train without at least one 10,000 series boxcar would have been unusual. In January of 1953, out of the original 4,000 cars built in the 1920s, 3,809 remained in revenue service nearly 30 years later, a testament to their design, durability, and the railroad that maintained them. A railroad that learned from war, adapted to change, and kept its freight moving. By 1953, these cars were no longer new, but they were still essential.